What is going on, Bucs fans? Back-to-back edition of the Pirate Parlay podcast on the Sick Podcast Network, doing back-to-back episodes here for you guys. Yesterday, we broke down the Bucs win over the Chargers, injury report, and so much more. Today, we're going to break down their matchup against the Cowboys, going behind enemy lines. We got a special guest on for you guys today. He covers the Cowboys, boots on the ground. He's on the beat. I'm super excited to have him in here. We'll cover the Cowboys offense, the defense, the injury report, and what the Bucs need to do to come out with a victory. We'll do that, all that, and more on the other side of the break.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to the Sick Podcast. Pirate Parlay.
Battle intercepted, picked off in the end zone. Bucs are going to beat the Chiefs. We're the champions of the world.
The sickest Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast. It's going to be sick.
Welcome back here, guys, on the other side of the Pirate Parlay podcast here on the Sick Podcast Network. As always, I'm your host, JC Allen. We've got a special show for you tonight. As we always do, go behind enemy lines to break down the opponent. This week, it just happens to be the Dallas Cowboys on Sunday Night Football. They didn't get flexed. Kind of surprised by that. Bucs on a four-game winning streak. Cowboys coming off a big game themselves. And we've got a special guest in here to break everything down regarding this team, regarding this game, and what's going on over there in Jerry World. So without a doubt, without a further ado, let me introduce our guest today, Saad Yousuf. He is a beat writer for the Dallas Cowboys for The Athletic. And he's going to come in here and tell us all about this Dallas Cowboys team, what the Bucs should be worried about, what they might be able to exploit. Saad, how are we doing?
I'm doing good, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Not the year that many expected for the Cowboys this year. They give big money contracts to Dak and CD, and 6-8 is not, I think, what they were looking at when the season started. Obviously, Dak goes down, injuries along the way. What kind of happened with this Cowboys team to put them in this position?
Yeah, I mean, I think injuries is like the first thing that people point to, but that's not really where I go, because this was a bad football team before the injuries even hit. So, I mean, I think the injuries are honestly a little bit of a cop-out when you're trying to explain this Cowboys season. They got absolutely bum rushed by the New Orleans Saints in week 2, and everybody except one corner was healthy. So, it's hard to put a finger on it. I mean, they did lose a bit of talent in free agency and in the offseason. They didn't upgrade the running back position at all. They forget upgrading the running back position, but they weren't even using their best running back adequately up until like 3-4 weeks ago. So I think it's a collection of reasons, and I would start with the offseason and not doing enough to address things personnel-wise in that regard. And then when they did get into the season, I don't know that they were really maximizing the personnel that they did have in the house.
Yeah, there's a lot of criticism on Jerry Jones for not doing stuff to add to this team in the offseason. Obviously, gave out big money contracts, but then kind of at the trade deadline, they make a trade kind of head scratcher there with the Panthers, giving up some pretty good draft equity there to get a wide receiver who hasn't worked out in his sophomore season now with the Panthers. Hasn't really done much so far with the Cowboys either. You look at one side of the ball, okay, you can see that struggling and being the reason, but for the Cowboys, it's really been both sides of the ball that have struggled all season long. And I guess I'll start with the defense first. It's easy to say, well, no Dak Prescott. Of course, there's going to be some, things going wrong on that side of the ball. But the defense coming in, they had some really good players on there. Trevon Diggs, obviously now he's out for the season, but Micah Parsons missed a bunch of time. But if you look at their numbers so far this year, they're the 26th ranked total defense in the league. They're allowing 356 yards per game. They've allowed 44 touchdowns. Their passing defense hasn't been great. 21st in the league, 219 yards allowed, 21 touchdowns to the air. Their rushing defense, even worse. They're 29th. They were 30th last week, but they're bumped up to 29th, allowing 136 yards with 22 touchdowns on the ground. Scoring defense, they're 29th in the league, allowing 27 points per game. Red zone defense doesn't get much better there. They're dead last in the league, allowing teams to score 73.3% of the time they get in there, score touchdowns. And then third down defense as well. It's a little bit better, but it's still not great for the Cowboys. Actually third down defense is really good. They're tied for second in the league, 34.1%. So they have a really good third down defense. That's about all they've got going for them right now. And that's probably going to take a hit with the loss of Overshawn there as well. But kind of what has happened to this defense, it wasn't a star-studded unit, like a breakout. Like people weren't talking about it as a top defense in the league before the injuries, but just kind of what has happened to it this season.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, I just got done saying, got done telling you that I wouldn't blame injuries, and that's kind of a cop-out. But when you talk about the defense in particular, the injuries really do have a lot to do with it. They lost one of their best pass rushers for the season in training camp. I would say he was probably their number 3 guy in Sam Williams. They lost him for the year with a torn ACL in camp. After week 4, they lost DeMarcus Lawrence. They still haven't got him back. He's probably their number 2 guy. In that same game, they lost Micah Parsons. He was out for 4 weeks. The next week, they lost their second or third round pick, Marshawn Nealon. Second round pick, I believe, Marshawn Nealon. He was there, Parsons was out, Lawrence was out, Sam Williams was out. They're like, all right, well, Marshawn Nealon thrust into the fire. First quarter of that next game, he was out for like 4 or 5 weeks. So they were their 5th string defensive end in week 5 was their starter. And then their all-pro cornerback last year, Deron Bland, on the final day of training camp, it came out that he had a foot injury. He ended up missing 3 months or so. He was about to come back in, I believe it was around mid-October, had a setback, missed an extra month. Right when he came back, Trayvon Diggs was out for 2 games. Then Diggs came back for a game, and they were all together. Then Diggs missed a game, and now he's out for the season. Eric Kendricks has been dealing with an injury, missed a game or 2. As you mentioned, Marvion Overshown's now out for the season. So when it comes to the defense, I will give the Cowboys that injuries have played a major role. And by the way, throughout all of this, they're breaking in a new defensive coordinator, a new scheme, everything like that with Mike Zimmer, because their defensive coordinator from the last 3 years, Dan Quinn, obviously the head coach in Washington now. So I do think injuries played a major role in why the defense has been in a tough position this year. But I will also add that the defense has been playing much, much better in the last 4 weeks. They held the Bengals down to 20 points before the special teams gap, and Bengals eventually scored the touchdown, won 27-20. They did a pretty good job against the Washington Commanders. Again, held them down to 9 points in 57 minutes until a wacky finish to that game. And then, those are 2 quality teams. They did whatever they did against the Giants and Panthers, but the Panthers were playing a little bit better as well, and they held them to 14 points. So I do think the defense has been better in the last 4 weeks. But if you're looking at it as a whole for the whole season, I do think injuries have been a major reason why they have struggled.
Yeah, you look at some of the names on here, you mentioned them, but Marquise Bell, who's seen snaps at safety. It goes down the line. Josh Butler at cornerback, Kalen Carson at cornerback, Trevon Diggs at cornerback, Darrell Johnson at defensive end, Marcus Lawrence at defensive end, Demario Overshawn at linebacker, and then obviously Sam Williams, as you mentioned, defensive end. It is about 14 names on their injured reserve list, and more than half of them are defensive players in the secondary or on the defensive line, adding pressure. But the guys who they do have still in the building, let's talk. We know what Micah Parsons can do. Todd Bowles called him a pain in the ass the other day in the best of ways. But let's kind of talk about some of the guys up front. I know that Mazi Smith is kind of dealing with an injury, and we'll get into that a little bit. But that front 4, Micah Parsons, Osa Odazingawa, Mazi Smith, and Chauncey Golston. Talk about those guys and what they can do. Linval Joseph, obviously, there as well. Marshawn Nealon getting in the mix. They got Carl Lawson, who's seen some snaps in the league. What's the biggest advantage that they have up front? Obviously, they've struggled to stop the run, but what can the Bucs expect out of these guys up front?
Yeah, I mean, Osa Odigizua is probably their best player in terms of, a defensive tackle. And And to be quite honest with you, he's probably their only quality player on the interior defensive line. Mozzie Smith has struggled mightily this year against any team not named the New York Giants. And Chauncey Golston is going through like kind of a position flex change. He was playing inside then outside. Now he's back outside a little bit more. So Chauncey has had a good year though. I think it's just, he would have benefited from playing in his role, which means, Micah, DeMarcus Lawrence, and Sam Williams are kind of doing their thing, and Chauncey gets to spell them. All of a sudden, though, the pressure of everything is getting put on Chauncey Golston's shoulders, and he's not really that player, at least at this point in his career right now. But I would say overall he's had a decent career. But Osa is probably their best player on the interior. Micah Parsons obviously is their best player on defense, and he is their wild card. And so, there's a fair argument to be made that since he's returned from injury in early November, he's been the best defensive player in the NFL by a lot of metrics. And so he is impressive, but they don't have a whole lot else going on. And it all ties in together. I know you asked about the defensive line, but that also is tied into the secondary as well, where you lost Trayvon Diggs. And by the way, you lost his backup, Josh Butler. And by the way, you lost his backup, Kalen Carson. So now you're on your fourth string guy who was on the practice squad a couple months ago, in Amani Oruwariye. So they're in a tough position in all of it. And it all plays together, because if you don't have a strong secondary that's holding down receivers, your pass rush doesn't have time to get home. So that's an issue the Cowboys are kind of working through.
We got a question from one of our listeners here. Richard asked, so what happened in the Dallas defense? Is Dan Quinn, has it been more injuries, or has it been the loss of Dan Quinn? What has been felt, more this season?
Definitely the injuries. I think Dan Quinn was a really, really good defensive coordinator, really great defensive mind, have a lot of respect for him. But I think we're seeing in the last 4 weeks, like I said, when Zimmer gets a chance to really get some guys and mostly get Micah going, what he's able to do. I mean, Micah didn't miss a single game due to injury. Maybe he didn't miss a single game throughout Dan Quinn's tenure. That's a great benefit to have for Dan Quinn. So, I think having players, and now you're seeing Zimmer and him being able to do what he does. I still think Dan Quinn is probably someone one versus one. I'd rather have Quinn over Zimmer, but definitely the injuries were a bigger factor than the change in defense.
Moving to that linebacker core, Eric Kendricks has had a resurgence to his career this season. He leads the team in tackles. He's been a bright spot. I feel like you mentioned he's been dealing with an injury and some personal problems caused him to miss practice this week. But they also have Marius Liafua, who is the rookie there. Demario Overshawn obviously was at one spot. He's not there. Talk to me about the linebacker core. Who steps up for Overshawn? Is it going to be just one person, or are they going to try to use multiple people to fill that role? Obviously, we know Michael will drop into that role sometimes too, just to keep offenses guessing. Who kind of fills that role for them with him out, and just a play of those guys overall?
Yeah, Marius Liafau is going to be the main guy that is called on to fill that role of Overshawn. And to be honest with you, I would say Liafau is probably maybe the most impressive rookie out of this class for the Cowboys. So it's not the worst thing for them to have to rely on him. He's been really good, and he's been good against the run. I think he has a little bit of work to do to become a 3-down linebacker, but he's really good in certain packages, and they've really deployed him a lot in the last game and a half since Overshawn has gone out. So I don't really think it's a committee job to fill in for Overshawn. To be quite honest with you, they really don't have bodies. They don't want to use Micah Parsons too much off the ball. They want to keep him where he's the biggest disruptor, which is on the defensive line as a pass rusher. So it's going to be – Eric Kendricks was already doing his thing. Marius Liafau is really tagged to be the next guy. They have Damone Clark and other guys like that, but it's really going to be Liafau.
So who's going to fill that? Who's the other starting linebacker for you guys? Because I just go based off your depth chart, and it has Liafau and Overshawn starting. Who's that third linebacker for you guys that play on it? Is it Nick Virgil? Is it Clark? Is it Is it Buddy Johnson? Who's usually playing that?
Yeah, so it's Kendricks. And so it's Kendricks and Leofau.
You guys
Without
play more of like a 4-2-5?
Yeah, I mean there's different I guess packages with Overshown. Things got kind of changed up mid-season for Zimmer because Overshown was such an athlete that Zimmer wanted him on the field no matter what. So there was a little bit of difference in how they were deploying linebackers. So when you do ask about how they fill Overshown's shoes, really the first thing before we even talk about personnel and which players are filling in for Overshown, it's
Right.
that the Cowboys are playing a different defense without Overshown. They're not playing the same packages. They're not playing the same way. So there is a little bit more of Overshown being the wild card, which is no longer a factor. Now it's more Kendricks, Leofau. Nick Vigil is another guy that they do call up on a lot because he has a history with Mike Zimmer, played with them in Cincinnati. Damone Clark, he's a solid player who played a lot of linebacker last year when the Cowboys were converting safeties to play linebackers because they ran out of bodies. And so he's another guy, but they're all kind of in the mix. But I would say the main two that you look at is Kendricks and Leofau right now.
Right. Yeah. Again, Kendricks just having a resurgent season. I think he's got 124 tackles on the year. It's just been a monster for you guys. Looking at the cornerback, obviously Trevon Diggs is out. We kind of talked about the secondary a little bit. Just correct me if I'm wrong here. Malik Hooker and Donovan Wilson at one of the safety spots. Deron Bland at the other cornerback finally came back. He had a great year last year as far as interceptions go. Jordan Lewis as the nickel back, and who's going to fill in for that cornerback spot? And kind of the Bucs have been dealing with their own injuries at that cornerback position, as Christopher Cole mentioned. So we definitely feel your pain over there. But what's that look like in the secondary? How these guys been playing? Who's kind of the leader of that group? Who kind of really the Bucs really have to worry about as far as turnovers and kind of watching for communication and everything like that.
Yeah, I mean, there's two guys, and it's the two guys that you would expect, which is Jordan Lewis and Deron Bland. And Jordan Lewis is the vet. He's a guy who has had a phenomenal year in the nickel. It goes a little, it's been a little bit of an unsung because of how bad the defense has been as a unit. But individually, Lewis has had a really good year. Deron Bland, like you mentioned, the interceptions, and not just the interceptions last year, but he set the NFL record for pick sixes in a season. So he right. And so he's a guy that, to me, I was out there in Oxnard for all of training camp, and one thing that really just stands out to you, his closing speed is just at a different level from most cornerbacks. It might look like he's beat, and then the last second he makes up ground. That's why he gets so many of these pick sixes, is because he's breaking on the ball when a quarterback thinks that they can throw this comeback or this hitch safely, and then Deron Bland is just breaking on it, taking the other way. So I think Deron Bland on breaking routes is probably the most scary thing that you're looking for on the Cowboys defense. But Jordan Lewis, in terms of consistency, one play after another, just solid. You're not really going to get Jordan Lewis burnt or anything like that. He's not going to get toasted on a route. He's more so that guy, with Deron Bland being more of the home run hitter. But also solid, also a guy that is not scared to make a step up and make tackles, which, obviously I wouldn't say the same about Trevon Diggs when he was in there. So that is a different flavor. But, for the Bucs and with Baker, I think the spot that you're looking at is that other side. And that's Amani Oruwariye, who started the last game, but was struggling and got replaced by Andrew Booth, who was called up from the practice squad. So if you're looking at if you're the Bucs and you're Baker, I expect Baker to do this 100%, given that Bryce Young was doing it, and Bryce Young is a second-year player. Baker's a seasoned vet. You got to be picking on whoever is on the other side of Deron Bland, because that's where the money is.
What's the morale on the defensive side of the ball in the locker room? What's the vibes there when you go in there? Like, how are these guys kind of trying to keep them? We're in the dog days now. 3 weeks left. They're 6-8. You're out of the playoff picture. You've got tough games left. You don't have any games where you look at like, hey, maybe we can kind of go on a run here with the Bucs, Eagles, and the Commanders. Two of them are divisional games with that rivalry against Eagles. What's the mood like on that in the locker room on that defensive side of the football?
I would say it's pretty solid. I would say there was like it hit rock bottom a couple weeks ago when Overshown went down. Because not only was Overshown just a good player, but I would say, objectively speaking, he was probably the personality heartbeat of the entire football team.
Wow.
Not just the defense, but the entire football team. When you talk about the charisma and personality, Micah Parsons was literally in tears after the game talking to the media when Overshown went down. It was a very severe knee injury. So morale was really, really low a week and a half ago. I think it's back to a lot better place right now. I think everybody understands where they are in the standings. You do feel a little bit more of the upbeat vibe because they're not mathematically eliminated. Trust me, I'm not sitting here and saying the Cowboys are going to go on some crazy miracle run,
Right.
but as a player, I understand having that mindset that until the fat lady sings, you're not really
Right.
you're not going home. So for them, they see it as like, all right, just win this game, win the next game, and then maybe Washington loses. They play Philly this week. They lose next week to Atlanta, and suddenly you have a win and in situation in week 18. I think that's a lot of what the conversation from their side is as players, which I respected and I understand where they're coming from. So I think until you're mathematically eliminated, it's pretty easy to keep that mindset a little bit, and being a little bit more distance from the Overshown injury. I think morale is back up a little bit.
And unfortunately, that could be the case by the time they go into that game on Sunday night, where they are mathematically eliminated. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. I want to give a big shout out to one of our sponsors here on the Parlay podcast, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers Cruise. Guys, they've extended their opportunity to get tickets. Christmas is only 5 days away now, 6 days away, almost 5 days away. This is your opportunity to get your tickets for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers Cruise. It goes from March 7th to 10th this upcoming year. It's going to go from Fort Lauderdale to Key West, the Bimini Bahamas, and back. It's going to be so much fun. There's so many players going on this. As you can see, some of the names there: Jordan Whitehead, Brad Johnson, Trey Palmer, Kalijah Cansey, Yaya Diaby, Jamel Dean, Graham Barton, Luke Gedeke, Mike A-Train, Allstott, Dexter Jackson, Robert Batman Woods, Jimmy Giles, Derek Brooks is making an appearance. Tristan Wirfs is going to be on there. So many more. There's so much fun on this cruise. There's so many different events, including the sail away party, where it kicks off the whole thing. You get your first opportunity to grab autographs and talk to these guys. Trivia contest, bingo, cocktail parties where you have this one-on-one interaction time. You're not rushed through like an autograph line. You really get to know these guys as people, not just players. They do player panels, water volleyball competition between the players and then against the crew, and theme parties that keep the fun going all cruise long. You're not going to want to miss this awesome opportunity to celebrate your team with fans from all around the nation, create lasting memories with those fans, with your family, and with your favorite Bucs players. Check out Tampa Bay Bucs Cruise. They've got 4 interior cabins left. Check them out. It's going to be an awesome time. Hope to see you guys there. Hope to see you guys on this cruise. This is going to be so much fun. Shifting gears to the offensive side of the ball now. We'll just kind of go through where they're ranking right now. Again, it hasn't been great. Total offense, they are ranked 17th, so not as bad as the defensive side. 328.9 yards per game, 29 touchdowns scored total. Passing offense has been much better than the run defense. Passing offense, kind of their saving grace. Obviously, CeeDee Lamb is a big part of that. 229 yards per game. They've got 21 scores through the air, ranked 12th in the league. Rushing offense, it's gotten much better. I will say that, and we'll get into that. Rico Dwaddle finally taking over. 3 straight 100-yard games, but 27th is their ranking as of right now, just averaging 99.8 yards per game and only 4 touchdowns on the ground. As I alluded to it earlier, they took too long to switch to the right back, and they kind of paid for it. Scoring offense, they're scoring 21.3 points per game. Again, 29 total touchdowns on both sides. Their red zone offense hasn't been great. When they get down in the red zone, they've been stymied more often than they've scored. And they're 28th in the league, just 47.5% conversion rate to touchdowns once they're in the red zone. And their third down offense, again, hasn't been great. 36.3% of the time, 23rd in the league, they're converting at a third down rate. That kind of stuff can happen when you're missing a bunch of Pro Bowl, all-pro players, like a guy like Zach Martin, a guy like Dak Prescott. Injuries haven't been kind of that side of the ball. Brandon Cooks missed a bunch of time as well. They tried to figure this running back thing out with Zeke Elliott and Dalvin Cook, and after Tony Pollard left, took way too long to switch over to Rico Dwaddle. What's been the Achilles heel of this Cowboys offense so far this season?
Yeah, I have a lot less grace for the Cowboys offense than I do for the Cowboys defense.
Let's hear it.
A lot of, like I just got done saying, with the defense is injuries, and it's been a tough situation. With the offense, it's all self-inflicted. These are all, people like to point to Dak's injury, but I would like to point out that they were 3-5 when Dak got hurt. The offense was not clicking. When I say self-inflicted, the blame goes all over the map. We can start with the front office. CeeDee Lamb ended up getting the exact deal that he would have gotten if they signed that contract in March, but they signed him in late August after training camp was already over. The holdout clearly had an effect, as he and Dak were not on the same page for like the first 5 weeks of the season, 5-6 weeks. We had body language concerns with CD and all this going on. All of that was very avoidable. Then you talk about the running back situation. Tony Pollard leads in free agency. I get it. He went to the Titans, signed a big contract. I understand not wanting to pay that money to him, but they did absolutely nothing. They didn't sign even somebody like Zach Moss in free agency, and then they proceeded to not even draft a single guy in the draft. And so then they signed Ezekiel Elliott, who has absolutely nothing left in the tank, and they still try to force feed him throughout early parts of the season instead of riding with Rico. So they do that. And so for all those reasons, and look, we've seen Kevontae Turpin shine a little bit every now and then in limited offensive snaps. Don't know why he hasn't been used more widely in the offensive scheme, why the coaches haven't incorporated a way to get the ball to him in open space a little bit more. So with all that being said, I do think the offense is the coaches, the players, the front office, all of them hold blame for why it is where it is. The last 4 weeks have been a little bit more encouraging, at least in the running game. And the thing that's impressed me most about the running game in the last 4 weeks is that Rico was the easy answer. I hate to say it, like acting like us sitting on the couch know more than the people in the building, but we all saw it in training camp. We all saw it throughout OTAs, everything, and it's out there on the record. You can see the written word. We all thought Rico was going to be the lead back, but for some reason the offensive staff did not see it the same way. But what's been most impressive about when he's gotten the rock in the last 4 weeks is that the offensive line has just been in full flux. Like, it has been all over the place. You lost your all-pro right guard, future Hall of Famer, and Zach Martin. He's done for the season. Tyler Guyton, your rookie left tackle, has struggled. His replacement, Chuma Adoga, came in. He got hurt. Then Guyton had to come back in for him. Then Brock Hoffman, who's played well at center, he's been playing solid because Cooper Beebe, their starting center, got a concussion and was out last week, and he's been out the last 2 games. He's on track to return against Tampa Bay. TJ Bass replaced Zach Martin. He went out with an injury. Then Chuma, who was replacing Tyler Guyton, had to move from left tackle to right guard and do that. So it's been musical chairs, and somehow through it all, Rico has been able to produce these 100-yard games. I will say, somehow they've also played literally the 2 worst run defenses in the NFL during this span, in the Carolina Panthers and the New York Giants. That certainly helps. But I do think it's encouraging that the way that they have been able to kind of lean into some of their strengths on offense, at least whatever they can at this point, being limited with their QB1 out for the season. So the offense, I think that's the one that's really going to come under a lot of scrutiny when the season's over, in terms of evaluation, especially because Mike McCarthy's the head coach. He's on the final year of his contract. He's also the offensive coordinator. He's also the offensive play caller. So it's all going to fall on his plate. So when we're looking at things after the season is over, the offense is going to come under a lot more scrutiny than the defense will, because there's a lot less excuses to go around.
Yeah, you talk about, Dak going down in week 8. It's not like the Cowboys offense was moving and grooving before that. Cooper Rush comes in. What's he been like? How has he been like? Richard asked if he's been playing better than Dak was prior to his injury. I know there was some, he came in for Dak a couple years ago, are they going to re-sign Dak or go with Cooper Rush? Which was just kind of crazy talk. But what has his play been like over the last couple of games since he's filled in, and how has he maybe kind of kept this team alive? I mean, 4 wins, 3 wins out of the last 4 games. After winning, losing his first 3, what's that been like, the Cooper Rush kind of era right now?
Yeah, I mean, look, he lost to the Houston Texans and the Philadelphia Eagles and the Cincinnati Bengals, and he's beat the Carolina Panthers and the New York Giants. And so the Washington Commanders was a good win for sure. I think the level of competition definitely has played a role. Cooper Rush, to me, is a really, really solid NFL backup quarterback. And I mean that with all due respect. I really think it's impressive. I think he is a guy that can come in and give you a solid stretch for a small, your team won't sink. It was a couple years ago in 2022, actually against Tampa, that Dak got hurt in week 1, and Cooper Rush came in 5 games, went 4-1. Perfect. That's exactly what you want from a backup quarterback. When you have a spare tire in your car, if you use it to get from one point to the next, that's the spare tire is doing its job. If you choose to use the spare tire for a cross-country road trip, you're the idiot. That's not the fault of the spare tire. So if Cooper Rush struggles because he's playing 10 games, he's not built to play 10 games. He's built to do fill-in duty. And can you have better backup quarterbacks? Yeah, every team would love to have Sam Darnold and Joe Flacco, but Dak Prescott's making $60 million a year. You're not going to get a perfect backup quarterback when you also don't have a quarterback on a rookie deal as your starter. So I think Cooper Rush is solid. He's steady. He's good. In my opinion, I think the Cowboys should re-sign Cooper Rush for the next couple of years. He's on an expiring deal. I think he's the perfect backup quarterback for this team, obviously depending on what happens with head coach and offensive coordinator and who they want in. But I think Cooper Rush is great as a backup. I think any talk about him being better than Dak is just people playing into some lazy narrative and hating on Dak. Dak is a legitimate franchise quarterback. Cooper Rush is a lifelong backup at 31 years old. There's no reality to that narrative.
Has there been some chance for maybe seeing Trey Lance and what he can do?
I don't think so. Look, Trey Lance, the last time we really saw him in extended action, he threw 5 interceptions in the preseason finale in one game. He had a bad training camp. He had a bad preseason. And to me, the Cowboys, even when they were 3-7, after Dak went out, they lost 2 more games. They were 3-7. And the coaches and front office always kept talking about they're still focused on winning the next game. If you're the coach and front office and you're preaching that message to the media and in the public, and you're preaching it to your locker room, you can't play the quarterback that is worse and still have that honest conversation with everybody else in the locker room. You can't tell CeeDee Lamb, we're trying to win, but we're going to put out the second best quarterback on the roster right now. So maybe if they become mathematically eliminated, I could see a situation where Trey could get some run. But to be honest, to go back to what I was just talking about with Cooper, I don't think Trey Lance has any future in Dallas. I think Cooper Rush might. So it might be in the Cowboys' benefit to just ride it out with Cooper, see what he's able to do. Obviously, you're risking injury a little bit, but that is what it is. But I do think Cooper Rush is clearly the better quarterback. And until they're mathematically eliminated, I don't think there's any chance Trey Lance sees the field.
Yeah. You mentioned CeeDee Lamb there. That's where I'm going next. Some of these skill players, we talked about the running backs, talked about quarterback, talked about the offensive line, but these skill position players, CeeDee Lamb still doing his thing, 94 catches, over 1,000 yards, 6 touchdowns in the season. You got Brandon Cooks, Jalen Tolbert there as well, and Jake Ferguson, who's really kind of come on over the last couple of years. Talk to me about those skill players, what kind of each of them bring to the table. And, just it feels like CD's having a down year. I don't know if it feels like that for you. Maybe it's just because of how dominant of a year he had last year. But, I mean, he's about to hit he's over 1,000 yards, about to hit 100 catches. Just kind of talk to me about those guys, what they're able to do, what each guy, what their specialty might be, and how they might be able to give some Bucs some problems.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think CD is having a down year relative to his high standards, but I still think he's top tier, top elite wide receiver in the NFL. There's no question about it. So I think it's all relative. I do think the bigger issue is the supporting cast around CD. That's really where the biggest problem has been. Also, I will say, again, I love CD, and I think he's great. But one of the reasons why I think he's having a little bit of a down year is because the efficiency has gone down. You can look at the total yards, and as you mentioned, he's up there for all of them. Last year, he was catching 75% of his passes. Now, having Dak for the full year plays a big part in that, but I will say, I've done the math. He was struggling in this even when Dak was in. And right now, he's catching 65% of his targets. So that's a 10% drop-off. So even though the bottom line stats look pretty solid, it's not efficient as it was last year. Cooper Rush being in plays a role in that. But I will say most of my attention goes to the guys around them. Jalen Tolbert has flashed, and I say that very generously in terms of a play here or there. There's probably been 8 to 10 plays of Jalen Tolbert this year that have stood out, and it's like, oh wow, he can maybe do something. But then they literally happen one time every 2 games. Hasn't been consistent. Brandon Cooks missed about half the season, and he hasn't played well when he has been in. He's a veteran. He's able to get free in the red zone, find ways, to get open on critical downs. That's great, but consistently he hasn't been there. Jalen Brooks, nothing to say on that. Jonathan Mingo has been a complete non-factor so far, and Turpin, in my estimation, hasn't been used to his full potential. So the supporting cast around CD has not done him any favors, and I think that's another reason why CD has been force-fed so many targets and why his efficiency has gone down, because even when he's not wide open, for some reason, he still seems like the better option than some of the other guys.
Yeah, and you look at Jake Ferguson, second on the team in receptions. He's third on the team in total yards, but there's a big goose egg in the red zone for a 6'5" target that's big, that has had some success there in recent years. That's not always a good sign for an offense that's struggling. We'll jump into the injury report here in a minute, kind of look at who's banged up, who might not play. Then we'll go into a little bit of matchups, and then kind of the keys to victory here to round things up. First, I just want to give a shout out to one of our other sponsors here at Fango Tickets. If you're tired of getting blitzed by big ticket companies, turn to Fango, your exclusively locally owned and operated Tampa Bay ticket partner that offers fans like you full transparency. They prioritize fair pricing with no hidden fees so that Tampa fans can enjoy the events, whatever events they're going to, with no hidden fees and no unexpected costs. Visit fango.com for unbeatable prices, personalized seat selection, and local partnerships that will take your game to the next level. My ad read just went all crazy on me. Check them out, guys. They're locally owned and operated. Again, they're doing some great things there. They're going to make it your one-stop shop for all your tickets. If you need parking it's going to be sold there. If you need a hotel, eventually it's going to be sold there. If you want to get reservations to a local bar, sports bar for a pregame or postgame, you can get that with some cool, really cool and great offers, promotions, and burger and beer for $15. You have a reservation. You don't got to wait in line. Don't got to try to get to the bar. Everything's right there ready for you. They're doing some great partnerships, great things. And again, locally owned. We want to support those businesses. Check out Fango Tickets, your number one source for live events in Tampa Bay. This injury report is pretty long for both teams. I got a little bit better, I feel like, for both teams too. On Thursday, KJ Britt, the Bucs linebacker, went from did not practice to limited, trending his way to play. Same thing with Mike Edwards, who is limited this week with a hamstring injury after missing the last 2 games. Mike Evans didn't practice yesterday, but that was more of a rest day. He's limited. He'll continue to be limited probably throughout the season as they continue to just kind of make sure that he's fine. Will Golston, full participation with the knee injury. Logan Hall bumped up from limited to full participation with a shoulder and wrist. Saw in the locker room today. He looks like he's going to be fine. Bucky Irvin, Christian Isian, both of those guys were game time decisions last week. So far through 2 practices, they've both been limited. Cameron Johnson, who's on IR, we're trying to work his way back from an ankle injury, their wide receiver. He's full participation. Baker Mayfield, as expected, with that knee injury, didn't practice yesterday. Full participant today, just more of a precautionary rest day type thing. Trey Palmer popped up today with an illness, did not participate. Sterling Shepard jumped up from did not participate to limited. Tyke Smith, again, limited both practice. Antoine Winfield Jr. will not play, do not practice for both of these. And Tristan Wirfs did not practice again for the second day. That's more just a precautionary thing. They don't, they don't want any flare-ups or anything like that. The big thing, right, the big one for the Bucs is Cade Otton still did not practice today, back-to-back days with a knee injury. So that's something to be wary of and kind of keep an eye on for tomorrow, as if he doesn't get out there even a limited role, it could mean that he's not going to go. For the Dallas Cowboys, TJ Bass, as you mentioned, has been kind of jumping around playing that left guard spot that Zach Martin was in.
Yeah, right guard. Yeah.
Right guard, rather. Yeah. He did not practice yesterday with a thigh injury, but it was limited on Thursday, so a bump up for him. Cooper Beebe, as he works his way back from concussion, full participation. Obviously, concussions are tricky. He's got to pass that independent neurologist. We saw that with Luke Gedeke this season. Jalen Brooks was added to the injury report today, limited with a knee injury. Trevon Diggs still in the injury report. They haven't placed him on injury reserve yet, but did not practice, obviously. Rico Dwaddle's dealing with the knee, but full last 2 days. Chuma Edoga, who's playing, is he playing left guard now for you guys?
He's playing left tackle right now. Yeah,
left tackle in place of Tyler Guyton, who's been struggling. He didn't practice yesterday, but bumped up to limited on Thursday. Today, Malik Hooker bumped up from limited to full with an ankle injury. Eric Kendricks didn't practice for the second day in a row. He is listed as a personal day, but also dealing with a calf injury. So that's something that we definitely want to monitor. I'm going to ask you about here in a minute. CeeDee Lamb dealing with that shoulder, bumped up from limited to full. Jordan Lewis remained limited. Again, nickel cornerback. You mentioned how great he's been so far this season. And dealing with an elbow injury is not great, but limited in practice. Mazi Smith didn't practice yesterday with the back, bumped up to limited. Tyler Smith bumped up, was full the last 2 days. Wanye Thomas, I believe I said that right, limited with a knee injury both days. Nick Virgil, that linebacker, didn't practice again for the second day with a foot injury. And Donovan Wilson, one of their safeties there, bumped up from limited to full. Talk to me about Eric Kendricks. What's going on with him? Because I think he's one of the bigger names on this list outside of the obviously the 3 offensive linemen that were all limited and BB trying to work his way back. But what's going on with Kendricks? Is it something that Cowboys fans should be worried about and something that Bucs fans should be happy about?
No, he's been dealing with something all season. I think he missed a game somewhere in there, but he's been able to rehab it and keep going. So he should be good to go. They do expect him to play.
Okay. And as far as TJ Bass and Udoga, both of those guys didn't practice yesterday, but bumped up to limited today. Is that something that you expect both of those guys to go kind of? And where's BB at in his concussion protocol? Because we know how tricky that can be.
Yeah, BB did clear concussion protocol yesterday, so that's good news for the Cowboys. And Bass, everybody else on the injury report, it's kind of a wait and see game for them. I think tomorrow's injury report will say a lot more, but they do believe everybody has a chance to go. That is kind of on the report, but not out for the season like Trayvon is.
Gotcha. All right, let's get into some of these matchups here. Obviously. Between the Bucs and Cowboys, Sunday Night Football. When you look at Mike Evans, obviously Trevon Diggs would have been the one to probably cover him now. Who's likely to be tasked with that? What's the kind of general consensus over there in Dallas with the Bucs coming in? Obviously, it's a home game, and the Cowboys and Bucks have plenty of experience playing each other the last couple of years. But what's the expectations? And obviously, who's going to be covering Mike Evans?
Yeah, I mean there's a lot of respect for sure for the Bucks. There's also a lot of tie-ins. I know Micah talked today about how much he respects Baker, and the way that Baker plays, I think meshes a lot with the way Micah likes to compete, with a little bit of that brash energy and bravado and all that. CeeDee Lamb spoke very highly of Baker and how much he was in his corner back at Oklahoma when they were there together. So a lot of respect for the Bucks. Mike McCarthy spoke today about how he respects Todd Bowles and the defenses that he's had throughout his career. So when it comes to covering Mike Evans, I would expect the Cowboys would want Deron Bland on him as much as possible, but I would expect the Bucks to do different things to get him off of Deron Bland and Jordan Lewis and onto Awarrior and Andrew Booth or whoever else the Cowboys have out there. And if they do that enough, I think that is just, monster advantage for Mike Evans and the Bucks.
When it comes to running the ball, obviously Rico Dowdle's been carrying the rock much better, 100 yards over the last 3 games, as we mentioned. But he hasn't gone up against a force like Vita Vea and Kalijah Kancey and Levante David. Those 3 guys right there all competing for the sack lead on the team. What's the expectations about the interior? How do you feel like these guys are going to hold up? How do you think they're going to be able to get pushed in the run game? Is it something that do you think the Cowboys, you look at last week with the Chargers abandoning the run game awfully soon? Do you think it's going to be kind of the same situation? Are they going to maybe, kind of just focus on trying to move the ball to the air? Or do you think they'll still try to get something going on the ground game?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think they're going to try to get something going on the ground game because that's, the recipe for success when you're playing against or playing with a backup quarterback. Now, the Bucks are kind of, I don't want to say middle of the pack, but I think when I looked, they were like number 11 against the run in the NFL this year, allowing around like 110 yards a game. So I do expect the Bucks and Vita Vea and that crew to be, very, very well equipped to handle it. And another player that has really gotten a lot of mention by the Cowboys in terms of respect has been Levante David. And I expect, that run defense to be solid for the Bucks.
Let's kind of move on into some of the situations here. If the Cowboys are going to win this game, particularly on offense, what do they need to do to come away with the victory?
They have to run the ball well. I mean, they can't have Cooper Rush getting into a shootout with Baker Mayfield. I think that's a recipe for disaster. They have to run the ball well. They need to because I mean, honestly, that's their best defense at this point as well, is to run the ball and keep Baker off the field and score points. I mean, they have to score points in the red zone. They've been bad in the red zone this entire season. This is the game for Jake Ferguson or Brevin Spanford or some of these other bigger guys, bigger targets to show up. So, I think that's the thing. They have to score touchdowns instead of field goals, and they have to limit the number of possessions for the Bucks.
If the Bucks are going to win this game on Sunday, what do they need to exploit on offense against the Cowboys defense?
I keep saying it, maybe the Cowboys' run defense is bad. Osa's good, but if you can find a way to get off of Osa and run at Mosley and things like that, there's a lot of success to be had there. And then, they also have a legitimate stellar quarterback. And with that being the case, this is maybe too simpleton of me to think like this, but just Deron Bland, Jordan Lewis, find the other guy, whatever receiver you're putting on him is, probably going to have an edge, but especially if you're able to scheme up Mike Evans on him, I think that'll be a recipe for success.
If the Cowboys win this game, they did what on defense to slow down the Bucs offense?
Turnovers. Got to get turnovers. I don't think, allowing the Bucs to drive and have 8 to 10 play drives, regardless of whether it ends in touchdowns or field goals, they have to have turnovers, because the same way that I talked about Rico running being good for the defense, getting turnovers is helping the offense. They have to not just stop the Bucs. but getting the stop against the Bucs and then the Bucs punting it and then Cowboys offense starting 80 yards away from the end zone, that's tough. They need to get turnovers and give good field position to the Cowboys offense.
And then the Buccaneers on their defense, what do they need to do to kind of prevent this Cowboys offense from, scoring more points than they're accustomed to this season?
I mean, stopping the run is the easy thing because that's what I mentioned what the Cowboys need to do well. The other thing that I will say that the Bucs really need to do is find a way to stop CeeDee Lamb, because if you stop CeeDee Lamb, there's not much else in the Cowboys passing game that's really gonna strike fear for any secondary. So it's about taking two players, put them on CeeDee, let everybody else function the way they do, and I think the Bucs will be fine.
All right, I got one more ad read, and then we're going to get to our final score predictions, and we'll get you out of here. I appreciate your time here today. But Mosley Heating and Air, when Florida heat hits hard, trust Mosley Heating and Air to keep you cool and comfortable. With over 25 years of experience, their family-owned business knows what it takes to keep your home's HVAC system running smoothly. Need to repair, a new system, or maintenance plan? They've got you covered. Call Mosley Heating and Air today at 813-230-3742 or visit mosleyheatingandair.com. Mosley Heating and Air, where comfort meets reliability. And again, that's the perfect time of the year if you're in the Tampa Bay area to get things done while it's not a million degrees out and you need your AC running at all time. Definitely give them a call. Again, another locally owned and operated business. We love that. Let's kind of get into, before we get into score prediction, I do have one other question. As far as the general consensus, from the fans, from fellow beat writers, what is the mood around this game? What do you expect from this game? Is it something that you're going into like, oh man, or is it kind of like, oh, we got a chance, or what's kind of the general mood around people who cover the team and fans who are rooting for the team?
It's hard to say because I think a lot of it's going to be dictated by what happens at noon on Sunday, right? I mean, when you talk about the vibes going into the game, I mean, if Washington beats Philadelphia, there's a whole different vibe for the players, the coaches, fans, anybody. That's the final nail in the coffin. Cowboys become mathematically eliminated. So right now it's kind of the same as it was. It's probably not going to happen, but riding the high of a win. But I think a lot of it will be dictated by what happens at noon on Sunday.
Do you expect a lot of people? Do you expect people to kind of pick the Bucs or pick the Cowboys to maybe upset the Bucs? Is that something that you kind of feel, or do you feel like come all these pundits and national people when it comes to it's just going to be a clear sweep of red other than the star, or what do you feel like there?
It should be a clear sweep of red. I really, the Cowboys have to play not a perfect football game. The Bucs are good, but they're you don't have to play perfect, but you have to play really, really good, mistake-free football, and I just don't see the Cowboys doing that, especially at home, where the Cowboys have been awful this year.
Yeah. Man, I appreciate your time so much. You've been super in depth, boots on the ground. I love that. You have your pulse, the pulse of the team at your fingertips. I appreciate that. The last thing I'm going to ask you for, second to last thing I'm going to ask you for, is your score prediction. I know it's early in the week. We still don't have our Friday reports, and just the way the cookie crumbles with this podcast. But early thoughts. What do you have as a score prediction for this game?
Yeah, like I said, I don't see a way that not that I don't see a way. I mean, we talked about how the Cowboys could win. I just don't see them being able to execute all of that. So I'm picking Bucs 34-20.
Okay. I'm right there with you. I've got 32-20. I think the Bucs are going to get over 30 points. I think the Cowboys can score some points, 2 touchdowns, 2 field goals. Sounds about right to me. They've got the kicker that can kick from anywhere. So they'll definitely, go for points here. I think early in the game, try to keep it close. But yeah, I think the Bucs should win this one handily. I think they should go on and to win the rest of their games, especially now it looks like no Derek Carr, no Alvin Kamara for the rest of the season potentially. And they've got that rematch, but this time at home against the Panthers that they beat in overtime. So they got to keep it rolling, and Dallas is just the next one on their schedule that they got to keep it rolling against. But again, you mentioned turnovers for the defense. The Bucs have to play clean football. They have struggled to do that in the past. Still had 2 turnovers this past week. We're able to overcome that. But if it starts to snowball, penalties, Bucs start playing the Bucs and the Cowboys, and like every team has been playing the refs this year, besides the Chiefs, then it's going to start to snowball for them, and that's where the Cowboys might find that crack to slide in. Saad Yousuf, from beat writer for the Cowboys on The Athletic. Tell everyone where they can find you. What do you got cooking up? What are you doing with your work? I know you're also over at the radio station too. Where can people find you?
Yeah, just follow my work at The Athletic. That is my day job. That's what I'm doing. So beat writer there. We also have the One Star Cowboys podcast that I do along with the other beat writer, John Machota. So and KT and Kent. So tune into that podcast if you're interested in any other Cowboys news. So yeah, those are the best ways.
Awesome. Appreciate your time. Thank you so much. Good luck this weekend, and I'll catch you around. Happy holidays, man.
All right, you too, man. Thanks.
There you guys go. Another edition of the Pirate Parlay podcast here on the Sick Podcast Network. Another great guest. Give some great information on Behind Enemy Lines episode here. I think the Bucs have it in the bag. I just don't see the Cowboys, again, with all the injuries, with all the shuffling, offensive line, secondary. I just you look across the board and, maybe besides CD versus Zion, CD versus Jamel, I think the clear advantage is on the Bucs. The one area you're going to have to look for, Micah Parsons is just a monster, and they're going to find ways to get him to shoot the gap and come through the middle. Cody Mauch has been really good. I think they'll try to find ways to get him coming through that A gap between Graham Barton and Ben Bredesen. Obviously, Luke Gedeke and Trisha Wirfs, I think, are the best tackle duo in the league. They've been phenomenal. So they'll have their hands full. But we said that last week against Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack, held them to just 2 pressures. So, I think the Bucs have a great chance of winning this game and again, keeping that streak rolling. 30 points. I think they go over again, 150 to 200 yards on the ground. The run defense has just been terrible for them. And Mike Evans they'll find a way to get Mike Evans singled up and on some of these lesser cornerbacks and do some damage. You can make a big chunk into that 1,000 yards. I feel like this week, JC Horns next week, which will be a tough challenge. You really don't want to come down the final game needing 100 or so yards. So if you can make a big chunk this week, I think that'll go a long way to him reaching that 1,000 yards. And of course, if Bucky keeps doing Bucky, we could look into next week as him grabbing, maybe even this week, grabbing 1,000 yards, becoming the first rusher for the Bucs since 2015, Doug Martin to do so. So should be a good game. I'm excited for it. We got some constituents over at Bucs Game Day out there covering it. So we'll be live, boots on the ground for that game, which will be a lot of fun. But that's going to do it for me. I'll be back Monday at 7 with the holidays, moving stuff around because I know a lot of people are going to be out Tuesday, Christmas shopping. Obviously, Wednesday is Christmas. Thursday is that Christmas hangover. So I'll be live Monday and Friday next week. Monday at 7, we'll be on here. We're breaking down that game against the Cowboys, what it means. We'll get a guest on in here as well talking about that. And then, of course, Behind Enemy Lines, we'll talk to one of our Panthers experts and get the buzz on what's going on with the Carolina Panthers. But that's going to do it for me on the Pirate Parlay podcast here on the Sick Podcast Network. As always, I appreciate you guys. If you're watching on YouTube, like, subscribe, turn notifications, share, send it to a friend, send it to a family member, tell them to give it a watch if they're Bucs fans. Let's get this podcast in front of the algorithm. If you're listening to it on any of the podcast streaming platforms, appreciate you guys. Come check us out live one time. Appreciate everybody there. Appreciate my producers in the back handling everything, popping everything up, your comments and everything else. I appreciate them as well. But that's going to do it for me here at the Pirate Parlay podcast on the Sick Podcast Network. I'm JC Allen, and we're out here. Peace out.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast Pirate Parlay on YouTube, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.